Crockett's voice cuts like a blade, exposing Donald's Jim Crow remarks on live TV. The studio crackles with tension as their fiery clash over race and identity ignites a national storm. Who will crack first? The CNN studio was a pressure cooker, the air thick with anticipation as the cameras zoomed in on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Congressman Byron. The debate, billed as a discussion on race and responsibility in America, had already been hyped for weeks. Moderated by a steely-eyed anchor, the stage was set for a showdown. Crockett, a firebrand from Texas known for her sharp tongue and unapologetic advocacy for black communities, sat with her arms crossed, her gaze locked on Donald's. He, a Florida conservative with a knack for stirring controversy, leaned back in his chair exuding confidence. The topic? Historical narratives and their impact on modern policy. But everyone knew this was personal. The anchor barely finished her opening question about reparations when Crockett pounced. "Congressman Donalds, you've said some things that raise eyebrows," she began, her voice steady but laced with venom. "You've romanticized the Jim Crow era, calling it a time of strong black families. Let's be real, sir. That was a time of lynchings, segregation, and systemic oppression. How can you sit here and defend that?" The audience gasped, a low murmur rippling through the studio. Donald's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "I didn't romanticize anything," he shot back, his tone measured but firm. "I said black families were resilient despite Jim Crow, not because of it. You're twisting my words to fit your narrative, Congresswoman." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "This is what you always do. Play the race card instead of engaging with facts." The crowd stirred, some clapping, others hissing. Crockett's lips curled into a tight smile, but her eyes burned with fury. "Facts?" she retorted, her voice rising. "The fact is, you've made a career out of downplaying the pain of our history. You stand there, a black man, and act like the scars of Jim Crow are just a footnote. You're out here telling folks it wasn't all bad. Who are you speaking for, Congressman? Because it ain't us." The studio erupted, half the audience cheering, the other half booing. The anchor tried to interject, but Crockett was a freight train. "And let's talk about your disconnect," she continued, her words sharp as glass. "You're married to a white woman, living a life far removed from the struggles of the black community. How dare you lecture us on what our history means?" The room went silent for a split second, the weight of her words hanging heavy. Donald's face hardened, his calm facade cracking. "You're crossing a line," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "My marriage has nothing to do with my commitment to black Americans. You don't get to gatekeep my identity because I don't fit your mold." He pointed a finger, his voice rising. "This is the problem with you, Jasmine. You think you own what it means to be black. You don't. And I'm not here for your personal attacks." Crockett didn't back down. "Personal? This is about accountability. You're out here cozying up to folks who'd roll back every civil rights gain we fought for, and you expect me to stay quiet? Nah, Byron, I'm calling it like I see it." The anchor finally cut in, her voice strained as she tried to steer the conversation back to policy. But the damage was done. The debate had turned into a battlefield, and neither side was yielding. As the segment broke for a quick pause, the studio buzzed with tension. Producers scrambled to keep things on track, but the audience was already whispering, phones out, ready to flood social media with clips. Crockett and Donald sat in their chairs, avoiding eye contact, each stewing in their anger. The anchor's voiceover promised more to come, but the real question was clear. How much hotter could this fire get? Back in the CNN studio, the lights blazed hotter, mirroring the simmering rage between Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Congressman Byron. The brief pause hadn't cooled the air. If anything, it had stoked the flames. Audience members, still clutching their phones, leaned forward, sensing the next round would be even more explosive. The anchor, visibly rattled but determined to maintain control, signaled the cameras to roll. "We're back with our debate on race and responsibility," she said, her voice tight. "Let's keep this civil, please." Crockett's eyes flicked toward Donald's, her expression a mix of defiance and disdain. She wasn't here to play nice. "Civil?" she said, cutting off the anchor. "Ain't nothing civil about pretending history didn't happen. Congressman, you dodged my question. Who are you speaking for when you polish up Jim Crow like it was some golden era? Because the black folks I know, the ones still dealing with the fallout of that time, they ain't clapping for your revisionism." Her words landed like punches, each one deliberate, her Texas drawl sharpening the edges. Donald's, his composure, fraying, shot back. "I'm speaking for people who want solutions, not victimhood. You keep dragging us back to the past, Jasmine, but I'm focused on the future. Black families today need jobs, schools, safety, not your endless lectures about what we can't overcome." He turned to the audience, his voice rising with conviction. "She wants to keep us stuck, divided, angry. I'm about building, not tearing down." The crowd split again, some cheering his call for progress, others jeering his dismissal of history. Crockett's laugh was sharp, cutting through the noise. "Building? You're building a fantasy where systemic racism is just a buzzword. You think jobs and schools erase the fact that redlining, mass incarceration, and voter suppression are still choking our communities? You're out here acting like we're post-racial, Byron, and it's insulting." She leaned forward, her hands gripping the table. "You don't get to erase the pain of our grandparents to sell your bootstraps narrative." Donald's eyes flashed with anger. "Don't you dare talk about my grandparents," he snapped. "My family lived through Jim Crow, same as yours. They fought, they survived, they thrived, and I honor that by refusing to let their suffering define us. You're the one disrespecting their legacy by acting like we're still in chains." The audience gasped, the personal jab hitting hard. Crockett's face tightened, but she didn't blink. "Oh, you want to talk legacy?" she fired back. "Your legacy right now is standing with folks who'd gut voting rights and call it reform. You're cozy with people who'd bring back poll taxes if they could. That's the company you keep, Congressman. So tell me, how's that honoring anybody?" The studio erupted, the crowd's roar drowning out the anchor's attempts to intervene. Donald's fist clenched on the table, his voice low but seething. "You don't know a damn thing about my values. You're so busy grandstanding you forgot how to listen." The anchor, now visibly sweating, jumped in. "Let's pivot to policy solutions," she pleaded, but Crockett wasn't having it. "Policy starts with truth," she said, her voice booming. "And the truth is, Congressman, you're selling a version of history that lets oppressors off the hook. That's not progress. That's betrayal." Donald shook his head, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Keep preaching, Jasmine, but people are tired of your sermons. They want results." As the segment hurtled toward another break, the tension was suffocating. The audience was on edge, social media already ablaze with hashtags and hot takes. Crockett and Donald's stared daggers at each other, the weight of their words fueling a fire that was far from burning out. The anchor's voiceover cut through, teasing the next round. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was war. The CNN studio lights pulsed like a heartbeat, amplifying the raw hostility between Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Congressman Byron Donalds. The audience, no longer just spectators, was a live wire of emotion, their murmurs and gasps fueling the chaos. Social media was a battlefield, with clips of the debate racking up millions of views, hashtags like Clyde Crockett vs. Donalds and Jim Crow Clash, trending worldwide. The anchor, her voice strained from trying to wrangle the escalating war, signaled the cameras back on. "We're diving back into this heated discussion," she said, her words barely masking her unease. "Let's focus on solutions for racial equity." Crockett, her eyes still locked on Donald's, didn't wait for a prompt. "Solutions start with honesty," she said, her voice a controlled burn. "You can't fix what you won't face, Congressman. You're out here acting like racism is a relic, but black folks are still dying in the streets, still fighting for a seat at the table. You want to talk equity? Start by admitting the system's still rigged." Her words were a challenge, daring him to dodge again. The audience leaned in, some nodding, others glaring at Donald's, waiting for his response. Donald's, his face a mask of barely contained fury, leaned into the mic. "I'm not denying racism exists, Jasmine, but I'm done with your one-note song about how we're all just victims. Equity isn't handed out, it's earned. Black communities need opportunity, not excuses. You want to talk rigged systems? Look at the policies you back that keep us trapped in failing schools and broken economies." His voice rose, sharp and accusatory. "You're not fighting for us. You're fighting for headlines." The crowd split, cheers clashing with boos, the noise swallowing the anchor's attempt to interject. Crockett's eyes narrowed, her voice cutting through the din. "Earned? You think we haven't been earning it for centuries? Blood, sweat, tears, and still getting pushed back. You're blaming us for the mess when you should be calling out the folks who built it." She pointed at him, her hand steady. "You're sitting there, deflecting, acting like your party's hands are clean. Tell me, Byron, when's the last time you challenged your colleagues on their dog whistle policies?" The audience roared, her words hitting like a gut punch. Donald's composure cracked, his voice booming. "Don't lecture me on challenging my party. I've fought for school choice, for economic zones, for criminal justice reform. Real change, not your empty rhetoric. You want to talk dog whistles? Look in the mirror. You're the one stoking division, telling black folks we're nothing without your savior complex." The personal jab landed hard, and Crockett's face tightened, her breath catching for a split second before she fired back. "Savior complex?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. "I'm out here fighting for people who look like me, who live the struggle you only visit when it suits you. You're the one playing respectability politics, Byron, thinking if you smile nice and talk about opportunity, the system will pat you on the head." She leaned closer, her words dripping with contempt. "Newsflash, they're using you, and you're too busy preening to see it." The studio exploded, the audience's reaction a chaotic mix of cheers and jeers. The anchor, now visibly panicked, tried to steer the conversation, but it was like shouting into a hurricane. Donald shook his head, his voice cold. "You're so blinded by your anger, you can't even see progress when it's right in front of you. I'm not your enemy, Jasmine, but you're making me one." Crockett's laugh was bitter, her eyes blazing. "You made that choice when you started whitewashing our pain." The anchor cut in, her voice desperate. "We'll take a quick break." But the cameras lingered, catching the raw hatred in their stares. Social media was already spiraling, and the nation was glued to the screen, waiting for the next blow. The CNN studio was a cauldron of barely contained chaos, the air electric with the venom exchanged between Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Congressman Byron Donalds. The cameras, still rolling despite the anchor's call for a break, caught every flicker of their mutual disdain. Social media was a wildfire, with clips of their clash dissected frame by frame, memes and hot takes flooding every platform. The audience, no longer just observers, was a roiling sea of emotion, their whispers and shouts blending into a fevered hum. The anchor, her face pale, forced a smile as the show resumed. "We're back," she said, her voice trembling. "Let's try to focus on constructive dialogue." Crockett, her posture rigid, didn't bother with pleasantries. "Constructive?" she said, her voice a razor's edge. "There's nothing constructive about pretending the past doesn't shape the present. Congressman, you keep talking about progress, but whose progress? Not the black families stuck in underfunded schools or profiled by police. You're out here waving a flag of optimism, while our communities are still bleeding." Her words were a direct assault, her eyes boring into Donald's, daring him to dismiss her again. Donald's, his jaw clenched, fired back with icy precision. "You love painting me as the villain, Jasmine, but I'm fighting for those same families. I'm pushing for policies that give them a way out. Charter schools, tax cuts, job programs. You're just shouting about problems without offering solutions." He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "You think you're the only one who cares? I'm in the trenches, working for change, while you're busy performing for the cameras." The audience split, some clapping for his pragmatism, others hissing at his jab. The tension was a living thing, coiling tighter with every word. Crockett's smile was cold, her voice dripping with scorn. "Performing? I'm speaking truth. Byron, you're the one tap dancing for folks who don't care about us. You think your policies are saving us. Those charter schools siphon money from public education, and your tax cuts help the rich, not the hood. You're selling us out and calling it help." She pointed at him, her hand steady. "You wanna talk trenches? I'm from the trenches. You're just visiting." The crowd erupted, her words igniting cheers and jeers. The anchor tried to interject, but Crockett's voice steamrolled over her. Donald's eyes flashed with fury, his voice rising. "Don't you dare question my roots. I grew up in Brooklyn, not some ivory tower. I know struggle, and I'm fighting. For people like my parents, who didn't need your pity to make it." He jabbed a finger toward her. "You're so busy playing martyr. You can't see the harm your policies do. Keeping people dependent, not empowered. That's not liberation, Jasmine. That's control." The audience gasped, the personal edge of his words cutting deep. Crockett's face hardened, but her voice stayed steady. "Control?" she shot back, her tone lethal. "You're out here, shilling for a system that's been controlling us for centuries. You think your Brooklyn story makes you untouchable? It doesn't. You're standing with people who'd lock us out of the ballot box and call it freedom. That's the betrayal I'm talking about." The studio was a powder keg, the crowd's roar drowning out the anchor's pleas for order. Donald shook his head, his voice low but seething. "You're twisting everything, as always. I'm not betraying anyone. I'm fighting for a future you're too angry to see." Crockett leaned closer, her words like a blade. "Angry? Damn right I'm angry. I'm angry for every black person who's been told to shut up and be grateful. You're not fighting for us, Byron. You're fighting for you." The anchor, now frantic, cut in. "We need to pause." But the cameras lingered, capturing the raw fury in their eyes. Social media was a frenzy. The nation hooked on the escalating war, and the stage was set for a final, explosive reckoning. The CNN studio was a furnace, the clash between Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Congressman Byron Donalds reaching a fever pitch. The cameras, defying the anchor's desperate call for a pause, zoomed in on their locked gazes, each radiating unyielding fury. Social media was a maelstrom, with Chacher Crockett vs. Donalds trending globally, clips of their confrontation amassing tens of millions of views. The audience, a volatile mix of supporters and detractors, buzzed with anticipation, their energy feeding the chaos. The anchor, her voice cracking, signaled the final segment. "We're back for the last round," she said, almost pleading. "Let's end with your visions for unity." Crockett, her eyes still burning, spoke first, her voice a controlled blaze. "Unity doesn't come from ignoring pain, Congressman. It comes from facing it. You keep pushing this rosy picture of progress, but black folks are still fighting for basic dignity. You want to unify? Start by owning the truth about our history, not sanitizing it for your audience." She leaned forward, her words sharp. "You're not fooling me, Byron. Your vision leaves too many of us behind." The crowd roared, her raw honesty striking a chord, though some hissed at her unrelenting tone. Donalds, his face taut, responded with steely resolve. Unity means building bridges, Jasmine, not burning them. I'm not sanitizing anything. I'm honoring the resilience of our people by focusing on what we can achieve. Your vision? It's just anger dressed up as justice, keeping us divided. While you play hero, his voice rose, cutting through the noise. I'm fighting for every Black American who wants a shot, not a lecture. You're not the gatekeeper of our future. The audience split, cheers clashing with boos, the divide as stark as ever. The anchor's attempts to moderate were drowned out. Crockett's laugh was sharp, her eyes flashing. Bridges? You're building bridges to nowhere, Byron. Your policies prop up the same systems that keep us down. You talk resilience, but you're ignoring the scars we carry. Unity isn't pretending we're all fine. It's fighting for the ones still stuck. She pointed at him, unwavering. You're out here acting like our struggle's over. It ain't, and I won't let you pretend it is. The studio erupted, her words igniting a firestorm of reactions. Donald's jaw tightened, his patience fraying. Enough, he snapped, his voice booming. I'm done with your distortions. I've spent my life proving my commitment to our community, and I won't let you erase that because I don't fit your script. You want to fight? Fight the real problems, not me. The personal edge in his words hit hard, and for a moment Crockett's expression flickered. Not with doubt, but with the weight of the divide between them. The anchor, sensing a breaking point, jumped in. Final statements, please. Crockett went first, her voice steady but fierce. I'm fighting for truth, for the people who've been silenced. We won't unify by ignoring our pain. We do it by facing it. Together. Donald's followed, his tone firm. I'm fighting for opportunity, for a future where we're not defined by our past. That's my unity. The audience was deafening, their reactions a chaotic blend of support and outrage. The anchor, exhausted, wrapped the show, but the cameras lingered, capturing the unspoken challenge in their stares. As the studio lights dimmed, the aftermath unfolded. Social media buzzed for weeks, with both Crockett and Donald's facing intense scrutiny. Constituents demanded answers, and the media dissected every word. Crockett doubled down, rallying her base with calls for accountability, while Donald's held firm, pushing his vision of progress. Yet in private, both reflected. Donald's on the sting of being called a traitor, Crockett on the cost of her unrelenting fight. Their clash became a catalyst, sparking town halls, podcasts, and protests nationwide. People began talking, really talking, about race, history, and what unity could mean. The debate didn't solve the divide, but it cracked it open, forcing a nation to confront its truths. In the end, Crockett and Donald's, still worlds apart, had ignited a dialogue that wouldn't be silenced. A triumph not of victory, but of raw, messy, necessary reckoning.